Hello again, I'm Dataman, the artist swordsman, and today I'm here to talk about Amon Saga. It's a weird sword and sorcery movie. Released by Toei Video in 1986, Amon Saga tells the story of Amon, a young courageous warrior in quest to avenge his dead mother. It takes place in a strange and unusual world, fantasy, magic, and, well, sword fighting. You know the drill, this is my show after all. The first thing I want to talk about is the cover. What's going on? It's quite hard to discern what's going on in the foreground, and while the background is a little more clear, it's still difficult to understand. At least the title is clearly visible, and the main character Amon is quite detailed, but everything else is so distorted and lacks in color and detail, it's difficult to say if it's a good or bad poster. I guess I'll say it's good because at least it's different. All the supposed characters in this movie are very generic and uninteresting. The one interesting character that is there is the world itself. And I really don't know if I should call it the character in itself. I'll save it for last because I want to keep up suspense and, well, it's the best part. Mommy always said best for last. Amon is this aloof, silent hero type on revenge quest. It's basically the least interesting story that can be done in a setting like this. Starting from the fact that nearly every single hero character has their parents dead, and ending in the fact that when the story starts, Amon is actually already the master of his craft and beats every single foe he comes across. This is quite uninteresting. He even has these majestic moments of heroism that feel really just jammed in with no regard to any reason in the story. And I at times was very frustrated with the story for trying to make him something he really wasn't. Gaius is a hulk of a man with a strange metal thing on his head. It was left ambiguous, at least for what I could tell, if it was an actual part of his head or a decorative item of sorts. Either way, I was confused, and it seemed very unnecessary besides protecting him from few blows. If it is a decorative item, who'd have it? And if it's a protective one, why not have a helmet? His personality is basically the classic berserker type that just fights and only stops to have beer and sleep snoring very loudly. That said, he was one of the more entertaining parts of this movie. There's also this Joker type good guy character in this movie. I didn't really think anything of him. Didn't have any presence really. And the fact that he was a genius supposedly in this movie was more like every other character was dumb. Excessively so. And by excessive I mean that a huge turtle carrying a city on its back is going around gathering soldiers to fight in a war. And in the city it stops at, it only asks for 9 soldiers from the whole city. When you think about how far the turtle had to walk and how much it had to eat and drink during the whole journey across the desert, no less, how wasteful it is just to take a few soldiers, most of whom just were selected through dumb luck. I don't believe these guys. The last point I want to make about the characters is that their names are all over the place. The main character is named Amon, which is a word that comes from ancient Egypt, from a god Amon-Ra, and means somewhat hidden. Then there's the big guy called Gaius, which is a Roman name that means cheers, basically. And then there's Ekuna, who's this other guy, Viking, which is a name that could be a mistranslation and come from Scandinavia. And then there's also these other names like Valhis and Lycia, who I don't know come from anywhere. The geographical ramifications of these names are glossed over with no regard at all to any spatial continuity. If a Roman name exists, so also have to Rome. But where is it then? Every character is on this strange desert town, so why not have names that originate in areas that are deserted? Amon is a name that comes from Egypt, so it would fit desert. So why not a couple Ahmeds and stuff because that would make far better than Gaius, Ekuna, Lichia and Valhis. Basically what I'm saying is that this story, naming-wise, makes no sense. I just think they chose the most cool names with no regards to the geographical ramifications of their choosing. That's quite sad, but also cute in a way. I glossed over the story before. It's not just about Amon seeking revenge for a dead mother, it's also about this world on a huge turtle trying to take over the desert with gold. To get the gold, he needed a map. To get the map, he kidnapped a princess, but when he got the map, he didn't want to return the princess because he was in love with her. Amon is also in love with the princess, so bummer I guess. Double the reason to kill the baddie. I find the story very simplistic and uninspired. Artistically speaking, this movie is quite good. I mean, the cover is interesting at least. The animation in most part is quite basic, but there are some framings that are very good, like this scene, this scene, this scene, and this scene of course. They are very classically balanced and interesting. Then there are some framings that are more experimental, I suppose, like this. It's weird seeing the different particles being right where they shouldn't be. Doesn't know if it should be a shot of the boy or of the scene he's witnessing, and basically shows of both. It shows that the animation is basically capable of anything you can imagine and not tied to a camera like normal filming. Then there are shots that are plain great, like this one. It's a shame it isn't a very common sight. It builds suspense well, even though it ends in an animal scare. I wasn't mad because I'd seen something good. When I was talking about experimental before, one scene I was thinking about was, on the lighter side, Amon's fight with an invisible monster, or maybe it's just in the darkness so it's invisible only to him. There's really something interesting about this movie and some scenes being so much better than everything else. Like this animation in this particular scene. It's very nice. And when it gets to the final, there's this sorcerer fight, and sorcerer versus sorcerer fight, which is even crazier, and Amon and Val's final battle. Because of course they would have a final battle. It's a rule in these kind of movies. Yet, regarding the animation, this sequence is the most confusing one in the whole movie. That's why I decided to go through it frame by frame to figure out how it ticks. You see, I don't like unsolved mysteries. Believe it or not, it took a load of work tracking everything that happened. I had to divide this one less than half a minute long scene into 7 parts to explain everything satisfyingly. 1. Amon goes in for a slice, but Valhis teleports away before it can connect. 2. Amon then uses his momentum to leap from the wall to hit vertically instead. Valhis blocks and pushes him away. 3. This shot I initially thought was a reflection on a sword. That wouldn't have been out of place in this movie, and very similar shot happened quickly later. The problem was how no one was holding the blade. Amon isn't, because these 2 frames show him holding it. Other fighters are in different direction, so it's none of them. Then I realized the shot is from the crack of the cave's door. Here is the proof, but it's shown very briefly. 4. Valhis strikes this time, breaking Amon's sword. 5. The scene is overly dramatic and confused me very much, since it wasn't Amon's only sword. Having desperation like this so makes no sense, because he can just pull off another sword, which he does. 6. Valhis forcefully stabs at Amon, but in this close-up he dodges, and the stab hits rock instead of his face. As the sword is retracted, the reflection shows Amon drawing his second sword. Valhis then turns around. 7. Volhus then turns back around to block Amon's hit with his arm guard. Honestly, I have no idea why. The reflection on his sword shows Amon being very close to his side. Also, he just stabbed directly at him, so he knew where he was. Either he's dumb, or the scene implied more turning than it showed. That would mean that Amon literally ran a circle around him, which begs the simple question, why didn't he just hit him in the back? Anyways, Volhus just throws Amon away with his simple hand movement, and nothing of substance was accomplished in this whole scene. This is one of the most headache-inducing scenes I have ever seen, and this movie directly follows it up with Fight of Sorcerers. Earlier, I said I wished for the animation to be better, but if this would have been multiplied as a result, just know, this was enough of a handful already. Moving on to something more fun, this movie is surprisingly gory. Casual neck snapping of a slightly older gentleman. In the same fight there's also casual decapitation, casual muscle growth, monster transformation, and halving of monsters, because that isn't horrifying. The villain Volhus is introduced by him having a blood bath with some flesh-like flowers in the bath also. It's an interesting choice that sends off some battery vibes, so to say. There's a huge heat creature Amon helps to kill. Of course, helping Amon is Ho, which really is the name of this dragon-human hybrid. Don't ask me, I don't understand it. One of the more outrageous scenes is when Golden Knight comes out of nowhere and starts fighting werewolves that appeared, and just plain pulls a face off one. In the final moment, there's also moments when this Joker guy hits someone in the face with a whip and the eye just pops out. In the final battle, there's also some head splitting that reminded me of Ninja Scroll. You could watch this movie for that reason. There's not much fan service in it, though. More man service, though. So basically, if you are into violence and hot-bulging men, check this out. Now it's finally come time to talk about the movie's world. In the very beginning, we see bones of a giant animal in the desert. It's very possible that there were many giant beasts on the land before it was deserted, but something happened to make it so. It's furthered by an old hooded figure being shot by the skeleton in a sort of ritualistic manner. We see a turtle that carries on its back a whole city, which means that indeed these giant monsters are a reality, or at least some of them still are. Other animals are very rarely shown. There are, of course, horses. That would make sense because horses are very domesticated and used by humans. So if there were to be a giant mass death of animals, there would still be horses. The guard says that there are owl cats, which I guess are mutant creatures born by owls and cats mating. I don't know if that would work, but still, an interesting idea. And some flesh-like flowers, which might mean that there's even crossing between flora and fauna, which is an even more interesting idea. There are dragons, as we see one, and also a dragon-human hybrid, which I guess was made by human and dragon mating, and dragon-ape, which is a big monster, and a sea serpent. I don't know if that's related to the dragon or more the snake, but still, an interesting idea. There are werewolves, likely wolves mating with humans. That's a disturbing idea. And so I think this cross-species mating has made for less diverse, but more survivalist animal kind in this world. It's an interesting concept that could have been explored way further, and I for one think that it at least is interesting. More interesting than most basic worlds I've seen in anime in general, that are basically just our world but one element added in. I'd say this movie is not very good at telegraphing these things about the world though, because a lot of thinking I had to do by myself. The movie didn't help at all, it just went along its quite boring plot, and I had to entertain myself by figuring out what was really happening around these very boring going-ons. The very ending implies that there might have been a machine at some point, machine of mass destruction maybe, and that might be the cause of why the world is like it is. But like I said, this movie left everything very ambiguous, so I can't say. Overall, I'd say this movie is 5 out of 10 material. It tries some interesting ideas and concepts, but in the end, doesn't follow up with basically any of them. It's an uninspired story about revenge, and in the and in the way, it traps in a princess, a search for gold, a cliched villain who just bathes in blood and speaks in this very dark voice. And in the end, the ending was just plain stupid. It had some nice moments of animation and gore though, so for those points, I'd say you should know if you are interested in watching this. See you next time!